You're listening to Two Babies in a Business, a podcast where Peter and I come together. We chat about life, business, partnership, and how all those things intermingle all the time. Today, our lovely producer, Emily Lundy, is joining us. And Emily, you put this in our calendar. One, because probably we were a bit behind on the old podcasts in the can. But two, I think you had a very important topic for us that you wanted to discuss, and we always welcome your presence here.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for inviting me back. It's good to be on the podcast again. How exciting. Yeah, I wanted to chat with you guys about managing expectations because it's something that's been on my mind a lot. I think it's something that we do well here at CIPR. But I guess I'll kick us off by saying I think managing expectations is something that you should do in pretty much every relationship that you have, just because I think it will serve you well. But I would argue that the two most important types of relationships, I guess, that you should be managing your expectations is professional and your romantic relationships, because I think those are the two that are probably going to serve you best. And I think we can dive into both of those. But why don't we start on the professional side? Because obviously we do a lot of that at CIPR. I guess I'll ask you the question. How did you, and I'm sure it was probably through a little bit of trial and error, but how did you come to the conclusion that managing expectations is something that should be at the forefront of project management here at CIPR?
Peter, why don't you, because I feel like you were going to jump in with all sorts of things before I answer this question. Go, because you were like, I feel like you moved forward. You were
I
moving.
was gonna add also importance of managing expectations with your own self, but we'll get into that at the
Oh, I
end.
like that. Mm.
Um, but yeah, I'll just say maybe that managing expectations is something we've had to work on over a period of time because I'm a sales guy, and sales guys love to just tell people they'll, yeah, whatever you want, we'll do it tomorrow. And so it's been a process because we had to unsales guy our systems and processes to actually have reasonable expectations amongst people, because salespeople are like that, right? They want to make the sale. They're all about creating excitement and enthusiasm and getting people all fired up. And then sometimes they don't do a good job of then actually seeing what's possible in terms of executing stuff. So I would say that we've done a lot in terms of, well, first of all, the need is extreme because obviously we're a busy agency and we have a lot to do and we have multiple clients with multiple expectations. So from a transitioning to sales to execution perspective, really it comes down to a few things we've kind of integrated into our processes. For example, we tell people that we onboard new projects on Tuesdays. And so that allows us to then, right in the sales process, create some expectations or manage expectations at the forefront. And then, we've created some process around, okay, so they're onboarded and then there's a sort of a 2-day period or whatever for, Christina to do her thing. And then sort of things happen after that. So I would just say that it's super important because when we transition from somebody from sales to a new client into joining our family and becoming part of our processes, that is where a lot of things can go wrong in terms of if you don't manage expectations properly, and then people feel disappointed right up from the onset, and then things just are. It's really hard to build trust after that. I think that trust is critical in our industries, and so the way you manage people's expectations is critical to building that trust over time.
I think that like the managing expectations part comes with the maturity of a business because like one, when CIPR was just me, I'm going to say it was easy to manage expectations because it was just me. I knew my skill set, I knew my capacity, I knew what I could handle, and I was working with a handful of people who all knew who I was working with. And, it became very easy for me to go, yeah, I can finish this in a week. Yeah, I know what this is. Yep, these are the 4 things I offer. And then you go through this growth stage of, you know, selling more staff, more clients, more offering. And you almost go through this kind of awkward adolescent stage where you think you can do a lot more than you can, but you can't, because you're just not there yet. And I think that, Peter, we had a lot of growing pains kind of in that awkward stage. I'm going to say it was, when our team, our first hire was a project manager. I think when we were a team of 3, I would say that managing expectations was easy too. That's when, we started Asana and systems and processes became a thing, because it wasn't just Peter and I writing on a whiteboard anymore. But it's almost like that every stage of growth, there needs to be like a reinventing of whatever it is. And so I think, the managing expectations, when we hit a certain level of staff members, I think your management of expectations, Peter, came on both sides. Like, there was a management of expectations on the client in terms of like, how long is this going to take? When is this going to start? Who's going to be on the file? All of the things that probably weren't happening. But there was also this management of expectations on our staff in terms of, this is what you need to know. This is the skill set you need to have. This is the types of things I'm bringing. And I think that, I remember sitting there with Brad, who's since moved on, but there were a few things you sold where Brad and I looked at each other and went, I don't know what the hell this is, or how to execute this, or I don't know what this whatever is. How are we going to do this? And then I think, really part of that journey led us to some really great client contracts lost because we didn't manage expectations. We didn't really know what we were doing. We weren't communicating to you that we knew what we were doing or not, and vice versa. I think it really led us to like getting a coach, cleaning up the business. And again, back to kind of when we hired a third person, a big cleanup of systems and processes. And then I like lean on kind of through that, EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, where one of the big things that we implemented rather quickly was the accountability chart. So like, who is doing what are our services, and continually having that service-based conversation. What are the services we offer here? And no, you're not selling outside of those things. And yes, if you are, you're coming back to the leadership team and having that conversation. I think that there was that, like I said, there's just like this growing up and shifting when it comes to managing expectations. And I think it's one, when your team grows, but 2, is you're trying to like figure out your service offering. And now I think we're at this place with managing expectations that like, we're very confident in what we're selling. We're very confident in the skill set of the team. And now we can do those appropriately. And I think we have a good system and process in place. What I'll say from just like the words managing expectations is like, those are my words. I'll own it. I was always a big fan of that. Like when I worked in corporate, I would always tell my team when I had team meetings is, I need to be able to manage expectations of my superiors for you. So to me, it's about a team play. I need to be able to, my boss is going to tell me, where is this? And I need to be able to know where that's at. And it's not a mechanism of like, oh, Johnny didn't do his work. It's a mechanism of, our team shifted to prioritize this, which you also said was that. And so, I mean, like many things, I brought that into an attitude here. I think over the years, it's evolved a few times into, manage expectations, but then it's, evolved into over communicate, right? Making sure we're over communicating. A website's down, we don't have an update, we're working on it. We're still just emailing, hey, we're working on it. And then now, kind of, I think the most recent iteration of managing expectations is no surprises, which, is something that we've worked into our current VTO. But for me, it's like, when you haven't managed expectations, when you haven't over communicated in a healthy way, not an unhealthy way, there are surprises. And when there are surprises, that leads to a decrease in client satisfaction, an increase in needing me particularly, and sometimes Peter, to get involved with the client, which Emily, I'm sure none of you want. We just get it away, right? So it, like to me, the growing up of managing expectations has become this no surprises for anyone. No surprises for me and ops, no surprises for sales, no surprises for you, no surprises for the client. No surprise parties here.
Yeah.
I like
And
that.
maybe
I
just
like that.
I'll just add maybe one more thing in terms of just kind of more broad, big, general, big picture is that like as a marketing and communications agency, it's really, again, I think this is something that comes with maturity over time, but like, just language around even how we sell stuff now is around, okay, first we're gonna first we're gonna like, for example, with paid search, Google paid search or PPC, that service. It's like we know from experience now that it takes 3 months to sort of get a campaign up and running, get it optimized, sort of get it working properly. And so, like, again, it's around, okay, there's the 3 month kind of incubation period or optimization period. And so it's just being really upfront with people about that, because I think a lot of people think marketing and communications is like, oh, I hired this marketing agency, I should have my sales 10x now in like a week. And it just, not everybody thinks that way, but a lot of people think that way, or people that don't have a lot of experience working with marketing and communications, or have never done it a lot. It's like this stuff takes time, and it takes time to do SEO. It takes time to build your brand. It takes time and investment. And so, I think also being kind of experienced over time is understanding the fact that it takes time and understanding how to communicate that to people, that it takes time. So again, something we used to do on the PR side and the communication side is we used to sell a strategy and a 12-month implementation plan upfront. And it's like, it was impossible. I was just basically guessing, making things up in terms of like what, I don't know how much help you need. And really, until we sit down and actually do the strategy and the tactical plan and we review it together and you tell us, yeah, this all makes sense. And oh, I have, Emily works in my team and she's able to do this and you guys can do that. Like the execution part is like, you know, it used to be just literally I just make up a number, a guess to number, and then it's like, well, geez, we're paying you this much and you're not getting that much value out of it. And so again, I think experience now tells us that actually, no, let's do the strategy and the tactical plan first. Let's sit down with the client. Let's review that together in detail. And then let's have a real conversation about what's it going to take to actually execute this, who's going to do what. And then I can give you a really accurate price as to what it's going to cost and that kind of thing. So again, I think it's just sort of maturity of a business over time of understanding where those pain points could be, and sort of changing the way we even sell things now, in the language you use around selling things, so that we're more properly setting the client up for success, and we're not kind of creating expectations that are unrealistic.
I think that's a good point, Peter. I think, Christina, to your point about over communication, I think regardless of the situation, I think that's how you almost resolve a lack of managing the expectation, right? Something goes, because life happens, something goes awry, the expectation isn't fitting in the box that maybe necessarily you set up the client or, your loved one or whoever, to quite fit. Then you've got to step in and communicate. And I'd say that's regardless of the relationship. But professionally, it is critically important. I think you both said something, though, that I'm going to pivot over to the romantic relationship side here for a second. No surprises in process. Sorry, that's not how love works. There's going to be surprises in life. And if you have your relationship set up, I mean, sure, it's good to have processes in your life, especially I know the two of you are, you have a very regimented in some senses lifestyle where there is a process set up, I think, for you. But I'm sure there's still surprises. I'm sure there's still gaps in the process because, you don't want to over organize your life. That just leads to unhappiness, in my opinion. Or maybe you're of a different opinion. But hey, I think if you create too much of a process around your life, it's less exciting. So I guess what I will say is I just turned 25. I'm kind of at a point in my life where lots of people that I know are in that 3 to 5 year relationship mark, and they're either getting married or they're breaking up. And it's a very sad time, but I think what happens in romantic relationships is I think you should set the expectation. I think you should manage your expectations early. This is who I am and this is how I will be in our relationship. But then people change, especially over 3 to 5 years. So then how do you manage the new expectations? How do you communicate properly so that you're, setting yourself up for success in the long term? So you both just celebrated 10 years this year. So how do you manage each other's expectations?
So I'll say a couple things based on what you said there. First of all, I think that this isn't a hard and fast rule, but 25 is very young. And so I think people go through a lot of changes in their life from the age of 20 to 30 and start to settle into their life more in that later 20s, earlier into the earlier 30s. So I think it's just natural that that happens and that change happens,
Absolutely.
and whatever.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's just part of growing up. But what I will say is the first thing I said to Christina when we started dating is don't stop me. That was me basically saying, I am who I am. I'm going to be the way I am. I want to be in a relationship where I can be me. And so, if you're going to try to stop me or change me, it's not going to work. And so I would say I was pretty upfront in terms of managing the expectations there. The other thing I'll say too is that, and it's interesting, I had a conversation with a parent at soccer this weekend, and we were talking, and she was talking about, I don't even know how we got talking on the topic, but we started talking about family planning and financial planning as a family. And she was sort of like, oh, my husband does not want to do any of that. He never wants to have that conversation. It's like a real like pain point. It's like they've been married. They have a 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid, and they've been married for a while now. And even Christine and I would say at the beginning had some challenges around those types of conversations. And so, they always, I think there's a saying, you never talk about politics and religion and maybe money with people, but it's like when it comes to like, a love interest, probably those are the things you need to be talking about quite openly because they're pretty fundamental into who you are, what your beliefs are, what your background is, right? And when Christina and I went to like, what do you call it? Like, when you get married in a church, you essentially have to go to like some sessions where you talk about some
Like
things and
pre, these two didn't just meet off the street.
yeah, like make sure you and that process that the church put us through had a bunch of things like, like how many kids do you want to have and
Mm.
what is your beliefs about this and that. And so my point is that like if you're in a relationship early in a relationship and the person you are with doesn't want to have real serious conversations about real serious topics that maybe are things that are sort of quote unquote topics you're not supposed to talk to others about, that's kind of an issue, right? And I think it's a bit of a red flag. And so like, heaven forbid you get into a situation where you're 10 years into a marriage and you're feeling a way about our finances but you can't have a conversation about that because the person keeps shutting you down. Like, those are, and I'm not saying like this particular couple, maybe it's fine for them, but that's just a challenge, right? And so you need to make sure that you are paying attention to those things, if that's important to you, which it should be in terms of open, transparent conversations and communication about all the things in life that are really critically important. And if the other person isn't wanting to have those conversations with you, then I think it's a real red flag and a question to you: is this the right partner for you? Would be what I would say to that.
I think that's a good point.
Peter, you and I started off having a lot of conversations. Like I also have lots of action in my office today, as you can see. If you're watching the video, you see a small child and a small dog, so just be prepared for the background noise. But you and I started off having conversations. Like we sat around your kitchen table every night. Side note, probably drank way too much, but like we had conversations about our future, about who we are, who we were, what we were doing, where we were going. And the conversations were very separate from us as a couple. Like, I think that we managed expectations and laid some ground rules without even knowing we were doing that. And I mean, lucky for us, a lot of that path intersected, right? A lot of the things we wanted were the same. But probably for the first 6 months of our relationship, we sat around that kitchen table at the old place in Bowness and just had conversations all night. And, it's where we learned about, each other's family dynamics. And so there's a whole, schwack of managing expectations there. And, what you can expect and, about work and business. And we were both in very transitionary times in our careers as well. So it sparked this conversation around what do we want out of careers? And again, they were very separate, but became very together, I think, at the same time.
I really like that you were having those conversations so early, because I think one thing that we do, and everybody does this, or maybe you disagree, feel free to disagree, but I think everybody, when they're first in those beginning stages of a relationship, they want to put their best foot forward. They want to look their best. And so you do put on a little bit of a show, and that's okay.
Sure.
Right? You want the other person to like you. So it makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, life is messy, as we've kind of already gone over. And so I think you have to be really honest about, hey, these are my hangups. This is what I won't, like you did, Peter. This is what I won't give into. Like, this is my hard stop. This is who I am. You can take it or leave it. And I think that's a very fair ask, what you said, but sometimes it is going to be a little bit messier and a little, maybe a bit of a steeper hill for the other person. But being upfront about what you need and making sure that expectation is clear, so that you're not walking into a relationship without.
But I think Emily, what goes with that is knowing yourself and knowing who you are and knowing what you need, because that's where I think, in especially romantic relationships, that's where it's different from Christina just disappeared. That's where it's different from work relationships, where in a romantic relationship, it's like, if you don't know yourself and you're not comfortable with yourself and you're not sort of like completely self-aware of what you need and what you want, then it's probably going to be impossible for the other party to ever actually meet you where you are, because could be probably pretty inconsistent and probably a little all over the place. And, I guess it begs the question sometimes is, do we rush into relationships sometimes because we're needing something from someone, when in fact what we need is actually just to settle ourselves with ourselves, maybe. And once we find and settle ourselves with ourselves, then maybe it becomes easier to get into that romantic relationship and then find that true match, because you know exactly who you are and what you need, and then you can communicate that, and then hopefully you can sort of, obviously, the other person too. That's easier said than done, obviously, though, but just conceptually.
But like, on that point, it's like, well, you and I had no, maybe in my subconscious mind, but like, I had no intention of you and I being a long-term relationship. Right? Like, and I think that also helped me manage expectations. And I was very much someone who kind of went from one boyfriend to the next. I liked the comfort of being in a relationship. I liked that, security or whatever it was. And I think for me, it was the first time where it was like, I'm just going to date some people, try to relax a bit. And I think that because I did that, and I managed my own expectations, Peter, to your point, it opened me up to something that was obviously meant to be and exactly what I needed.
I think basically before you were going maybe from boyfriend relationship to relationship because you were looking for that relationship to give you something that you didn't yourself weren't giving yourself. And so when you changed your mind about that, then you started to get what you needed from yourself, and then the relationship just fell into place, I think.
Yeah,
I could see that being very true. I think there was a shift for me in my last relationship, because I think I was probably going through something very similar, where it was, obviously I wanted somebody to hang out with and have a good time with, but I wanted somebody to be my partner and be there for me. And it was like, I still want that, but in a different way, because at that time I was what I would call the lowest of the low maintenance girlfriend. Like, I didn't ask for anything. I never expected anything, which lent itself to a lot, but I got to a certain point where it was like, I need more here, and you're not giving that to me. And so now I know that I can't be the lowest of the low maintenance girlfriend anymore. It doesn't work for me. I don't get what I want out of the relationship, and then I'm very unhappy. And you know what? Can do all that on my own. So
totally.
So now that I
Totally.
know that, right, I'm not gonna, you're kind of raising the bar, I would think, because then it's like, well, I'm not gonna settle just to have
Totally.
that. I'm not gonna settle.
Yeah.
So I
Totally.
think knowing yourself is a great point, Peter.
Yeah. So I guess just to conclude this, because I wanted to kind of, it kind of fits into what I wanted to, is that sort of
Wait,
like
wait, wait, wait. I don't want you to conclude yet. I just wanted
oh,
to say, like, it's okay, you get married and you whatever, but like the other relationship that pops up that you need to manage is your kids. And
I
I
was
think,
thinking the same,
like,
actually.
I
Yeah.
think, Peter, again, we are no parenting experts, but I think it's the little things that we try to do. Even yesterday, on Saturday night, we could tell that not everyone got to do what they wanted to do on the weekend. So on Saturday, before we went to bed, all of us got to put all of us, including mom and dad, including Bear, there were some representatives for the dog, got to put two things on a list. And we made sure that we tackled all of the list. There were a couple things on the list that didn't get done, but it was talked about. We didn't get this one done. Is that okay? We're moving to the next one. And everyone had just a really rewarding and great day. And I think it's
mm,
just those little things as parents you can do to manage expectations, right? Like
totally.
kids need attention. I think one of the small things I try to do when they're like, mom, 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 and I'm trying to talk to someone else is like grab a hand, put a hand on a shoulder, do something to like acknowledge, I hear you, you're next. Trying to like, again, manage that expectation that like mom needs to finish this and now we're shifting to someone else. So again, I think that's a whole other thing to unpack. But like, again, I don't want to miss that. Those are,
Yeah.
I manage those expectations probably more now than anybody else.
Well, and what I was going to say was interesting about yesterday is that what we did a little bit differently than what we do sometimes is we ended up doing the fun thing that the kids wanted to do first thing in the day. And I feel like that was really good because I think what parents often do is like, they have their priorities and then, yeah, we'll do your thing. We'll do your thing. Your kids are literally waiting all day. And then, hopefully you have time at the end of the day to actually get to it. Whereas yesterday we just did the thing that they wanted to do. We went to the pump track kind of thing or whatever for their bikes. And they did that. And I feel like they felt really good. That was awesome. And then I feel like then they were more chill for the rest of the day. So, I mean, that was kind of I don't know. It was, I guess, deliberately done like that, but something I think parents probably honestly, like, as I think we've talked about in this book, I'm going to write about a book and it's called Life by Design. And one of the chapters is called Mommy and Daddy Issues. And I think a lot of that comes from, our parents, our greatest source of disappointment in life is our parents, whether that is deliberate or intentional or not. Our parents will never meet our expectations of them because they're humans. And so it's not a
Mm.
criticism, it's just a reality. But I think as parents, sometimes we can be a little more mindful about, hey, I told my kid we would do this, and I really need to hold true to that commitment because if I continue to not follow through on my commitments, then my child will just grow up, feeling extremely disappointed and unfulfilled by his parental experience. And so, anyways, I think that's just sort of an interesting kind of point to think about. And again, it's not because parents are doing anything wrong. Parents are trying to manage many, many priorities and many, many different things. And so it's just not that easy, right? So yeah, and I wanted to maybe this is what I wanted to conclude on is this is one of my favorite people to listen to and books to read is a guy named Mo Gaudat. He used to be the head of Google X, and he's really a mathematician first. He wrote a book called Solve for Happy, and so he basically created an equation for happiness, which is happiness is equal or greater to the equal to or greater than the events in your life minus the expectations of how life should be. And so, really, it's when it comes to your own happiness, it kind of says lower your expectations a little bit. um, but I think there's a lot of value in considering that. As I think sometimes we create unrealistic expectations in our minds about how life should be. And quite frankly, if we lower those expectations, then we can literally be happy all the time and every day because things just exceed our expectations. And so, anyways, that just, I think probably in many situations, life, professional, and otherwise, that's just good advice. So,
I agree. All right. Thanks, team. That was awesome.
thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Two Babies in a Business. To learn more, visit CIPRcommunications.com or catch us on our socials at CIPR Comms.